All right, rocking and rolling. I think my audio should be good. If not, and somebody shows up, let me know if my audio is not good. I also, all right. So the impetus of this talk, it's kind of connected to my last live stream. Uh, Again, tell me if my audio is working. And uh, man, okay, how to begin here? Uh, I just listened to PDK's homeroom this morning, so that's on my mind with ritual. Should I turn on the light to increase more light? And what is the value of ritual? That's where I'll start. What's the value of ritual? What's the value of tradition? Some pieces that I would connect there, some mosaics would be classical education, trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, poetic. Um, Another piece would be this little riff on deconstruction that happened in Nate's. What's up, Jonathan? In Nate's uh, conversation with who are the people? Roberto and another guy on a Bulgakov book. Um, but he had a little section in there. I timestamped it. It's in the description actually, and it starts at the pertinent part where Nate asks Roberto about deconstruction because Roberto's Catholic, grew up Protestant evangelically, I think, and then the other gentleman in there is an Orthodox priest who also grew up evangelical. But he asked Roberto about deconstruction, and Roberto says something like, um, he's like trying to clarify. He says, what do you mean by deconstruction? And he says basically, if by deconstruction you mean uh, growing in my faith, sure. And to quote one of my favorite quotes, Michael Polanyi, doubt and belief are ultimately equivalent. Doubt relies on a subterranean set of tacit belief in something else. So, what up, McMo? So, doubt is belief. It's just belief that you cannot name or articulate, and naming is framing. So, doubt is a belief that you don't have a frame for. It is mystagogical. It is apophatic. It is not this. So, cataphatic belief is this. Apophatic belief is not this. And everything, all of your action, and this is why, like, Jordan Peterson's whole thing is acting as if, belief is acting as if in the world, which is the fullness, mind and body. What you do with your mind and your body. Okay, finish out this thought before you add in something else, Luke. So how you act in the world is what you believe, and sometimes that is in accordance with what you think you believe, and sometimes it's against that, which is why St. Paul wrote in Romans 7, "O wretched man that I am, the things that I want to do I don't do, and the things that I don't want to do I find myself keep doing. Who will save me from this body of destruction? Praise be to God." And that's why we go to therapists. Peter Rollins says this all the time. This is why we go to therapists. It's why we go to a psychoanalyst. Is you're trying to figure out, why do I keep doing these things in my life that I don't want to do, or why do I keep not doing the things that I want to do, which is what Jordan Peterson's whole self-authoring thing is about. So that to some degree you can integrate these two things. So that reminds me, I was talking a little bit with there's too many people in this little corner. Andrew Bieber. I think his name is Andrew Bieber because it's like Justin. But he is somewhat of a lurker. But he reached out to me at some point a while ago, and I've been having an ongoing conversation with him. Jason Almontree. Hey, Sherry, morning. And he was talking about, he's like a wild boy. He's like Jason. He doesn't really participate in a lot of these conversations and just reads the Bible all the time. So he has a lot of um, yeah, exactly that. Naming is framing, and doubt is just belief that you don't have a framing for. You don't have a name for. I don't know what it is. This is why. Sorry, I'm distracting myself. I'll go back to Andrew and Jason in that conversation. But That is why most people who deconstruct, they're deconstructing from this is why I heard that guy at the uh, when they were in the Netherlands at that conference. I've heard PBK say this. I initially first heard it from Rob Bell, but tell me about the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in him either. When you deconstruct from a narrow, encapsulated, bounded idea, propositional idea of God, and you're like, well, that God sucks, the sky daddy or whatever. That doesn't mean that you're no longer a Christian. That doesn't mean that you no longer believe. You just don't believe that. This is why there's this false binary that does not see the unity behind any distinction between atheists and Christians or self-identifying Christians. And this is just start listening to people say this. When people talk about who is and who is not a Christian, they're talking about self-identity to ideas. They're talking about cataphatic belief. They're talking about conscious belief. So they do not understand this thing that Polanyi is saying about doubt and belief being equivalent. If you don't understand that aspect of belief, you're playing a game, which actually is connected to one of the things in my description. Okay, I'm going to go here. Table, Jason, and Andrew for a while. It's about integration. It'll probably come back up. Track with me. It's like reading Faulkner or something. Just let it wash over you. Circumambulating. It wasn't literal, but it was script. It was off script. So I was talking to Chad the other day. Yeah, exactly. What does it mean to believe in your heart? Okay. Oh, sorry. We have a landline phone for our kids, and I don't know who this is calling. Pause. You guys get to hear me take a phone call. Hello? 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 I don't want to talk to you. Okay. Thank you for the shirt compliment. My wife does not like it because I look like a sailor. Okay. What was I saying? Oh, I was talking to Chad, and Chad was saying that he loves to look, and he does this sometimes in his videos. He likes to go through the etymology of words, right? Um, which is which is great. It's a very Barfieldian thing to do, right? Because Barfield said that words are fossils of ancient consciousness. Because if you really think about it in that term, naming is framing. When we figure out a name for something, that's capturing, at least in a modern consciousness, I suppose, where you don't save the appearances, where you don't see names as icons. This is why I talk about iconic thinking. But if you don't see a name as an icon, you're framing something at a moment in time and capturing it like an image, like a photograph. Boom, this is a moment in time. However, sometimes photographs can be icons, where they can be portals that are more than just the image in and of itself. So that's what a name should be, but we've forgotten that because Socrates, right, lamented the written word. It will make us forget. Um, but so that's what Barfield meant by a name, and if you go into it, it's a fossil of a previous consciousness because you can track these words back if you follow an etymology, and you can go into the Latin or the Greek or the whatever and try to piece all these different cognates and parts of a word together because that's what it is. It's a mosaic. Preposition, the cognate, the middle section, which is usually rooted in some sort of a ground, which is rooted in a verb probably, and then like a suffix or the end of a word, and you piece all that together and you make sense of it, and you can see this. It becomes a mosaic, right? And so I did that the other day with script, and it's really interesting because script is all tied back to writing, right? So that, and hence that is a little bit of the inspiration for this thing going off script, and why I say like I'm the ad libber. Because the script is the framing, the narrative that has come before. But this is why, like, even you guys remember, I'm putting a lot of things out there, but when Vervaeke and was it Vervaeke and Peugeot that were talking about the nominalist versus the narratival? So the narratival, that's the way that I understand it. The narratival is the story that you put on something. It's the words that you put on something. It's your understanding, your description of something, your map of whatever happened. So we have that within a script or within a word, like this is what that word means. But like Chad was saying to me, when you go into the etymology of a word, you're often just like, holy cow, I didn't realize the word meant that, or that was its history, or that's where it came from. But again, Barfield, it's a fossilized consciousness. And we're connected to that, but very often words change and they form and they're fluid. But it's just a different thing because everything is like that, right? Being is like that. You have potency and you have act, you have potential, and then you have being. And these things happen at different times. It's reminding me a lot of Rupert Sheldrake's book, The Physics of Angels, because, um, and this actually came up in one of the videos that I linked in here. Rupert Sheldrake spoke with Bernardo Castrop, and it was fantastic. It was really, really good. But one of the things that they don't go into in there, but is we tend to think they do a little bit because they talk about Plato's eternal realms, and they say like that is the static realm, the eternal realm where things don't change. But I don't know that that's completely true because again, like there isn't anything, there isn't. This is where I'll go hardcore Hegelian and Peter Rollins and Todd McGowan is anytime you predicate something, included in that in a tacit, indirect, implicit way is the opposite. Anytime you say anything, there is identity and non-identity, which is the crystal logic that Jordan Daniel Wood is talking about. And I don't think you can escape it. Life and death, potency and act, being, non-being, uh, creation, creator, maybe God, man. Um, and so I want to look at comments, but I gotta finish fleshing a few things out. So what I would say is that there is an eternal realm, there's a spiritual realm, but it's not static. I don't think it's static. I just think that the rate of change is much slower, which is kind of like what the Bible's talking about, I think, when it says, day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as a day. And you can get in, and I think we can understand this a little bit with quantum mechanics because how an angel or you could say even light to bring in like C.S. Lewis's space trilogy, how light reacts to time is completely different than us. Light is we measure time by light, right? The speed of light. And by light we see everything. But what if you flipped this thing, and that's what C.S. Lewis does kind of in his Ransom trilogy, sorry Ted, is that he inverts that and he says essentially the angels, the Eldila in that book are we see by light and we interact with physical things. But he said, what if the Eldila interact with light this way? Like to them, a cell phone, a material thing, a material object is light. They interact and play with light, and they just move through matter. Matter is as light to them. So it's the opposite. It's hard to wrap your head around it. But like what that would do to your interaction of time, well, a day would be as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years would be as a day. It would be time would be irrelevant to them. It would just then a now for us would be like, well, an angel potentially sees like materially, almost like in the Tesseract in Interstellar when you go there. So it's like the bookshelf in Interstellar. An angel could just physically walk along time like a bookshelf. And you're just like, whoa, that's trippy. Well, I mean, you can understand it by physics, although it's not exactly physics. All models are false, some are useful. And so, okay, so one more thing. This is where I'll bring back in Jason and Andrew. And he was saying, oh, and this connected, who said this the other day? It was some offhanded comment, I think, in a just chatting in a Jacob comment. Who said it? I think it was maybe Sandy. I wrote it down in the comment, but now I've forgotten it. See, here's the thing. I outsourced my memory to my writing, and I wrote it in the comment, and then I forgot it. But this is why I think a little bit. Oh, here's the Andrew connection, and maybe I'll remember the comment. And I'd never pieced this together, but right. So we have in the Bible, we walk by faith, not by sight. But what Andrew said is that someday when you are theosified or holy or at one, we are no longer when you are integrated, the integrated divided man. When you get to that point where you are integrated, when your I is one. So Jesus said in John 7, I believe, I can't remember if it's 6 or 7, but the eye is the lamp of the body. It's one of those confusing verses. Uh, and if your eye is one or pure, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is divided, your whole body will be full of darkness. And and then James, Saint James, in his epistle says, he talks about the double-mindedness, and he talks about if you do not have wisdom, you're double-minded and you're tossed to and fro by every wave of doctrine. Right? You're like, oh, do I believe this? Do I believe this? What's going on? But he said, so like to have one mind is to see with. I mean, there's a great lecture. I have it tagged in my YouTube channel. From Dr. Eugenia Constantina about the phronema of the church, what it means to have the mind of Christ, which is to be of one mind. And so if you have one mind, you no longer have the faith that comes from hearing, right? Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God, the logos of God, right? That's the New Testament verse. And this is a Jewish distinction between that I've talked a little bit with Yosef about seeing and hearing. But if you just see, you no longer have to do that step removed thing where you're hearing from someone else. If you just see it, it's like the Jeremiah 31, 1 Samuel 8. You don't need a king. This came up in the conversation in the just chatting about. So this is the conversation with Andrew and Jason. This is why I think in the eschaton there won't be a king, and Christ will be a king, but not Christ in a way that would be like the Joseph king or the Davidic Solomonic king. It will be God in me, Christ in me. You won't need a king because God will teach you from the inner man, and faith. It won't be faith anymore. It'll just be seeing. You'll just see. So that's why, like Andrew said, Jesus in the New Testament, he could just see into the heart of men, right? He just knew things. The woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well, or whatever, or the Luke 20. Is it Luke 20, where he debates with the scribes about on whose authority does he do these things? And then this is why Jesus can always pin people down by asking him questions, because like he knows what's in your heart. He could just see it. It reminds me of like the Matrix, and Andrew was saying it'll be unbelievable what kind of, I mean, it's kind of science fiction-y, the kinds of freedom and ability that you'll walk on water. Like I when you see correctly, I truly think like nothing will be impossible for you. You'll have the faith to move mountains. You'll just see it, and sight will be reality. Pure act. This is why I think you need this merging of divine simplicity and process theism, because potency and act, God is both. God's becoming is our becoming. This is why even like the Sam Tiedemann distinctions of, I said this last night, sorry, and this is probably a heretical thing. Jesus was God and Jesus became God, because that distinction falls apart in the identity of identity and non-identity. So I'll affirm Sam Tiedemann in that, but like he's also fully God. And I've heard Jason say like, or Cal has said this: everything that's true of Christ, I think, will eventually be true of us. And I know a lot of people don't want to go there, but that's because they don't want to go off script. There we go. They just want to regurgitate I don't know if they truly know what they think about things, because they're still in the grammar phase of the trivium. Okay, move into logic, learn about logical fallacies, and then move into the poetic, where in order to really make it something your own, which again isn't arbitrary, it's not distethered from grammar and logic in the tradition, but it becomes your own. Okay, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to read some comments. StreamYard. All right, let's go back here. Let's go back. See this? Does this deconstruction lead to hysteric? I think it can. But I think that has more to do with your temperament and your fear of the unknown. It's probably like a conservative temperament. Like remember, it's the the conservative naturally is scared of the chimera, and the liberal is scared of the hillbilly, the static thing, the thing that's inbred. And I think if you are more of a conservative temperament and you deconstruct, it will throw you into a hysteria. It'll throw you into a chaos. But this is why I never really deconstructed. I deconstructed some of my beliefs. Like I figured out, oh, like
I'm here.
So yeah, finish out that thought, and then I'll see what you have to say. So like, if you're thrown into this chaos, well, you realize, I don't know who said that. Chaos isn't really chaos. Chaos is just unnamed order. That's what chaos is. Everything is somewhat of an order. You just don't know what it is. Again, it's apophatic. It's doubt. It's apophatic belief. It's doubt that's not. It's belief that's not named.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have anything to say yet.
Oh, okay. You can just hang out.
I'm just hanging out.
Yeah, no problem. This is good.
I like to react to things, and I have some dishes to wash. So
cool. All right. Sweet. Just you want to mute yourself and then just pop in whenever you want to pop in.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. What else do we say? Sherry's here. Yes. And then Mandy, you said this doubt is belief you don't have a frame for. Something unnamed, right? What else? This is live television. Yeah, this is the new live TV. We're off script. Tayo, what up? I did not know this. McMo, dropping some truth. Nietzsche was basically an etymologist. Sweet. Wittgenstein. I don't know anything about Wittgenstein. All right, now we're back. Here we got some riffing, script, scribe, scrawl. Yeah, place and time, dialectics exist, intercommunication difficult. Yeah, this is like one of those. This is one of my struggles, and I believe like it was helpful when Peugeot said to me, and I think this is true. And this gets into the Vervaeke 4Ps that initiation is necessary for the fullness of understanding. You can't understand something until you're initiated in it, because that's participation, right? That's participatory knowing. You have to engage in the rituals. You have to engage in the procedures. You have to engage in the what is it? Propositional, procedural, participatory, perspectival. Because you won't get that perspectival without the participatory. But this is where, because of writing, and I think because of propositionalism, because of all the script stuff, and because of thinking of, like, even when we say things literal is one of those super fuzzy words. Go look in the etymology of literal. We take that to mean physicalist, but that's not what literal means. Like, I don't honestly really know what literal means. It's a hard word. And so if you think that you can have this dialectic with ancient consciousness, like you're reading the Bible and you can just understand what they're saying, like what's that perspicuity of scripture? That's one of those beliefs of sola scriptura or Protestants. Okay, again, you're denying the perceiver. Sheldrake said that really well too in the beginning of that lecture. I really recommend that people go watch that talk with Bernardo Castro. But it's not. They said this isn't for beginners. This isn't like for laying out their broader ideas and theories. It's basically, he was basically asking Sheldrake if he's an idealist. And Sheldrake says, no, not really. And then he just lays out. And I found out Bernardo Castro was a huge Sheldrake fan who's been following his work for like 25 years. And he essentially said, I talk about things differently, but I do that very intentionally because I see myself as not being able to integrate and have all the nuance that you say Sheldrake says. And he's like, I see that as my own handicap, but like, it's just what it is. And I was like, amen, Sheldrake's a boss. So anyhow, you can't just, if you think you're reading an ancient text and you're just seeing it one-to-one, again, it's this one-to-one thing versus the many-to-many. You're not. You can't. What you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. You can't enter into an ancient consciousness. It's just not without a ton of work. And then even to that degree, I don't know what you're capable of. But all right, let's keep rolling here. You got something to say?
I think so.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so I think really everything comes down to being and non-being. And there's a line from The Life of Moses that I've been pondering on for like a couple years. And I don't have anything to say about it, but this is the line. The definition of truth is this: not to have a mistaken apprehension of being. Falsehood is a kind of impression which arises in the understanding about non-being, as though what does not exist does in fact exist, but truth is the sure apprehension of real being. True being is what possesses existence in its own nature. Non-being is what is existent only in appearance with no self-subsisting nature.
There's a lot there. That's good.
Yeah. And so I think this idea that you have of what personalist knowing,
Yeah.
of like you can't know anything without knowing the knower.
I think it's
and
true.
being the knower and the known at the same time. And like, you know, like when it's all marriage too, like you become one flesh and know, like that's everything.
No, I think it is. This, which is why I think we know it's always a balance with talking all these things. Because again, like I don't think you don't necessarily learn things through, you do and do not learn things through talking about things,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
you already know all this stuff. It's just you've forgotten it, which is why like this things are so simple. Like it really is marriage. Like it's that basic. Which is kind of like what Andrew, in a Just Chatting, Andrew was talking to Jacob on his most recent, I think it's his most recent Hebrew Bible study in there. I can't remember where it is, 2 hour mark, something like that.
Mhm.
And he was trying to just lay out his thinking, and he was illustrating all this from Genesis, and he was talking about the seed. He thinks a lot about the seed, because it really is these simple metaphors like marriage, seeds,
Mhm.
everything's there.
Yeah, faith is a mustard seed for a reason.
Yeah. Dude, totally. That quote is really good. You should, if you can, or if you remember afterwards, it would be great if you like put in the comments, and I'd pin it or something. 'Cause that's a good one. It's a really good one. All right. If you have anything else, just riff. I'm looking at comments here. I think what Fleba says here is great. And Peugeot says this as much. Like using quantum mechanics to explain the mechanics of angels is bringing them into the material world. Yes, and Peugeot said something like as much. He's just like, do you really again, it's a one-to-one.
Mhm.
All models are false. Some are useful. All models are false. All models are false. All of them. All models are
Mhm.
false. Some are useful. So like I'm not trying to equate. That's the one-to-one correspondence, angels with quantum mechanics. I'm just using it as an illustration.
Yeah.
It's just helpful to expand, to like open you up, to think, to go off script. Because that's the thing. It's like Richard Rohr has this thing of like, he calls them the boxes of development or something. It's something like the 3 boxes where he talks about like order, disorder, reorder. That's the spiral.
Mhm.
That's death and resurrection. It's to get out of the closed loop of the Ouroboros. I mean, you got to do that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I have another thought that I've been thinking a lot.
Sweet.
Okay. So I recently read Lilith for the first time, which is, it was actually the first book my priest recommended to me.
Nice. I
Because
like
my
your
daughter's
priest
name is
instantly.
Lilith, and he was like, "Have you read the book named that?" And I was like, "No." He's like, oh, "You should."
Dude, after your Chad talk and after that, I want to meet your priest someday because
Okay.
he's saying all the best things.
He's so great. I feel like I probably shouldn't like place him on such a high pedestal as I do, but at the same time, he is so Jesus Christ in my life that it's hard not to, you know?
That's kind of the goal, isn't it,
Yeah.
right? Christ in me.
Mhm.
Where's Jesus? Right there.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been thinking about the constructed self and the created self.
Okay. I like it.
So like in life, we're just constructing all the time. We're just
Mm-hmm.
adding on to ourselves. we're enlarging ourselves to have something to be proud of,
Yeah.
I suppose. And then in the end, it's all stripped away, and what's left is who we were created to be. And like the experience of the removal of everything you constructed, and what that is, and then relating that to like the idea of like ascesis as like practicing death, like removing from yourself all these additional things, and allow like existing in a state of prayer, which is the state of being in the presence of God.
Yeah. Maybe becoming like a child.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I think that's really good. There's a Master Eckhart line. So there's something I haven't fully worked out. There's two things. So there's this Master Eckhart line that says like salvation, the process of salvation is not one of addition but of subtraction.
Mm-hmm.
So that reminds me kind of what you're saying, or like falling. I often say falling off the peak of Mount Stupid in Dunning-Kruger,
Yeah.
or learned ignorance, or whatever. It's all this ascesis, or becoming like a child, the child mind. But then there's this piece from the Nate talk, because I'm just promoting these because these are all in my mind, my conscious Congress, and these are good talks. But that Bulgakov talk where they talk about like within the East, there's too many things. This other thing just came into my mind.
Yeah. Yes.
There's that's also a little thing that we say in this little corner all the time. Too many things, and we just like can't.
Yes.
So in the Bulgakov talk, they speak to the difference within Eastern Christianity, and that it's not like the Eastern non-Christian traditions where salvation or theosis is one of pure. It's not exactly ego death, where it's like a complete elimination of the self and then an entering into the oneness of nirvana. You retain. It's almost like a fullness of the self. This is my handle, the white stone name, like whatever that is, whoever you truly are. It maintains the distinction and the difference of. It's the both end thing. It's the creature creator distinction, but like where those lines are really hard to draw, and it's the and the self. This is why I balk so much when like Paul will get fired up or pejoratively talk about the secret sacred self. I'm just like, there's some truth in that needs to be agape into being.
Yeah.
So go ahead. What up, Jonathan? So.
Hello.
Well,
I feel like you had something to say.
I wasn't planning to join, but you're just like hitting all the all the good stuff.
Well, this is great.
Okay, I want to pull off of falling off the top of Mount Stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see the Tower of Babel is like the society we live in, basically. It's the sum of all the constructed selves.
Well, that's kind of like, who's the other Neil from West Virginia who said society is for order and communion is for belonging, like, yeah. Or that's all institutions are inherently demonic. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. So sorry, keep going.
Okay. So we're building this giant tower, and like we're all like super pumped to climb to the top and become like take God, right? But then like the world is inverted. So we're actually digging a pit. So this is like this in the Psalms, where it's like there's like these lines all the time of like rescue me from the pit that the enemy has like laid a trap for me.
Yeah, my antichrist false salvation.
Yeah. So then we're experiencing this as a climb up the tower towards God.
Mm-hmm.
But then we fall, and this is like the fall is actually a rise, and this gets into the life of Moses also, my number 1 favorite book, my number 2 favorite book.
All right.
So Saint Gregory of Nyssa has this image of suddenly your soul is free to ascend to the heights, like you release you remove your shoes and then like ascend into the darkness, and that's the fall off the tower. And then you like the midpoint is like the foot of the mountain of God, and then you begin to ascend the mountain, and then we get into like the wisdom of God is the foolishness of man. Like it looks like you're just descending into poverty and foolishness, and like why, like just foolishness is the best way to describe it. But in the truest sense, you are climbing the mountain of God, which has no end.
Dude, and this is, yes, to riff on that, which is also why I think this is the greatest intellectual reason, I think, of why I'm ultimately a Christian, because of trampling down death by death, because of that very thing. You think you're ascending a tower and you're not. And the freedom is counterintuitively death.
Yes. 100%.
Jonathan, I know you got stuff. Just let it roll.
I don't even know like what to say.
Go off script. Just riff it. Just spit out things. Just like speak in tongues.
Hot take, all right? I think we're always speaking in tongues, basically, in the sense that like nonverbal language is also happening, except it happens continually. And it's like so like we can consciously use nonverbal language, but in this unconscious use of it, it's always going on naturally, quote unquote. One might say supernaturally. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. This idea is super salient to me, so I tend to spin on it. But that's what I got when it comes to speaking in tongues, because we're always speaking in tongues.
I can roll with that.
What up, Michael?
What's up?
Hey, man.
What you got? You just coming to hang, or you got truth?
I really
Well,
loved your.
I saw the notification and I messed up the time, so I only heard the last couple minutes or whatever. So I'm not well prepared, but I'm here for whatever.
There's no script, so it's okay.
That's right.
I really
Words
liked
can
your
be stumbling
video.
blocks only when they're scripted. Only when you can't see the iconicity within them. Only when you're doing the one-to-one thing. If they're not that, they're just things to play with, like a child. Become like a child. Play with those words. Build some towers. Knock them down.
Mike, it's nice to meet you. I've been like watching your, kind of following your stuff for a while. Not like super closely, but definitely some stuff. And I really liked your video yesterday about I think it was the Shroud of Turin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. I watched that one while I was on the road, so I couldn't actually see it, but I did like see some parts, and just like, I don't know, that's something I had never delved into, so it was really, I don't know, it was moving.
Yeah, I think it's weird. Like, I don't know. That's one where I can understand why people are like suspicious of the ideas that like every relic or whatever is real and authentic or whatever. But well, that's one where the evidence is pretty compelling, where I don't even know why like Protestants and evangelicals don't take it more seriously. So
Yeah.
um
Yeah, man.
because
I mean, it was interesting because since I wasn't watching it, I kept thinking that they were talking about a dead body, and I was like, "All right, this doesn't make any sense." But then, as soon as I like realized that he was talking about like a garment, and I opened the screen and looked a bit, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is like a really compelling argument or case." It's not an argument; it's more so like a presentation of information. You know, it's like, wow.
yeah, well, I just clipped out all the stuff about like, you know, the trauma or whatever that he endured. The whole talk, he talks more about like all the weird, crazy evidence of like they're saying like at one part like it looks like you can see like images of his teeth, and so they're saying, well, the only way that that could be like on the image is if the radiation that produced the image came from within the body, like so. It's all sorts of crazy stuff. It's pretty cool.
No shit. Yeah.
Again, he's like Neo.
I'm not sure if I followed exactly what that means there, like what you're saying there, like about the radiation.
Well, that's like so they just, I mean, it is like a mystery what, like, how was this image produced? And the best hypothesis now that they have is that it's caused by radiation, and basically it's like because it's like a photograph, but it's not, you know, like when we print a photograph, we use material that is like really sensitive to light radiation, so it's easy to develop. But that's like a linen cloth. But if you have powerful enough radiation, like more powerful than just regular sunlight, you can do it's the same thing. You can still make a photograph. It's just, yeah, but you need it. So it must have been like, so basically they're like, the only way that this is possible is super powerful radiation, like either shown down from above or came from within the body. And then like saying that like if you can see his teeth and stuff that on the image, that means it must have come from inside. So that's
resurrection comes from within.
That's wild.
Is that what we're saying?
From within Jesus, at least.
And then apply John 17.
That yes, that if we are in Jesus and Jesus is in us.
If thine eye be single, if thine eye be
Christ.
single, you know, if thine eye be single, if you're at the balance, then your body is full of light, right? Or something like that.
I don't think this is quite it, Anthony, but could be. Here we go. Here we go with science again. Phlebas bringing in the dialectic. He's bringing in the contrast.
That wasn't the point of my video, though. My video, because I had that little clip from Malcolm and Simone talking to Paul, where they were talking about how if you can go through trauma, but you're not like, if you have the right mindset, if you're like, this is good for me to go through this experience, you won't be traumatized in the same way. And then that just ultimately, so then I put that, and then I put a bunch of these just facts about like, this is all the stuff that the person whose image is on the shroud, but you know, Jesus went through. And then I had that little clip that Christian had with his talk about when he had one of his talks with Paul, where he talked about he had like a vision where like he was nailing into Jesus's hand, and then he looked up and like saw Jesus smiling at him. And then I put little John Piper clip. It made it into a Christian YouTube video, but I just was like, this is the connection that it makes, because it brought Hebrews 12. You know, he did it for the joy. So it's like, even if he was not actually smiling, he was smiling on the inside, which is like crazy to think about, you know.
For real. Yeah. I'm gonna scratch what I was gonna say. It's irrelevant.
I think there was something that came up. One or the other. I had a very I watched a lot of stuff yesterday. So there was a conversation with what you just said. Remind me. I think this is in this conversation. I'm giving all these false references, but it doesn't matter. So it was Ken Lowry and climbing Mount Sophia, and he was speaking with one of his friends, and I think they brought up that point, which is a very, I don't know, it's from like that scene in The Hidden Life, but like what is trauma? Or somebody sent me a study, like my last evangelical church, my last small group leader, he sent me a study once, I don't know, like 7 years ago, about there was some new study that said, like if you voluntarily take on something that is traumatic, like going to the gym, working out, hot yoga, whatever, doing really hard labor, and then if it's something that you choose to do voluntarily, it like benefits you, it makes you stronger, it makes you anti-fragile, right? But if you don't want it, and if you're fighting it, and if you're hating it, if you are opposed to it, again, this is the whole, like, the perceiver is necessary for perception, why the person is the center of everything. Because, like, if you are pushing against it, the locus of all meaning is the person. If you're fighting against it, it gives you cancer. So why in one person does it increase strength and anti-fragility, and in the other person, the exact same thing, produces cancer? Which is something I don't know.
That's
I
what
want to talk.
Peterson said with like voluntary suffering, right? Just kinda...
Which is related. That's another thing that I had on here, which is related to transformation and work and learning and doing hard things, because that kind of thing is popular now. Like PVK will talk about steep slope. It's one of the poles of orthodoxy, or like everybody's into like David Goggins now, like like, I want to go run 200 miles, blah, and just like do push-up competitions and things. And I think part of that is connected to, okay, here's a few, this is a different mosaic, but I think about this like even being at home with my family around Christmas and the allure of screens. And so like I have all my kids home. There are times when like my wife and I are home and all the kids are home. And if we aren't very proactively like playing games or doing something, if we're all just like sitting around, people lose their minds. Because like we just don't have a, in ancient times, you didn't have the capacity to sit around. This is one of the problems of affluenza and technology, is we can just we have this leisure time with like, what am I doing with myself? But then like ancient people were just like, I'm working my ass off from like sunrise to sunset so that I can eat and not
I'm not
die.
sure about this. I'm going to push back a little bit. All right.
Okay, I don't even know what I'm saying.
I see where I kind of see where you're going. And I'm like,
okay.
I'm with it. But I think part of this not inability to like sit is connected to this whole propositional, or like propositional left-brainism, closed circle state of things, and because when we like to like just let the words run and like keep almost like a virtual, it's like we like to abstract ourselves away from the reality of what's going on via this constant thinking, talking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you sit, that's when you encounter your experience as it is, or something like that. And then I also think that people actually had more leisure time than like they didn't work like crazy like we do, but
well, the leisure time was integrated, it was built in, you're washing.
It was all kind of like leisurely in a way. But yeah, there's definitely, I can see both sides of that for sure.
Yes, our hobbies are the hard labor of the ancient world.
Yeah. Let's go rock climbing.
Yeah,
plant a garden.
Definitely a lot of time to rest between planting and harvest. So like that's a built-in leisure time. If you're even though you all have other responsibilities, it means that that's a season where, for the most part, you're not going to have 50 and 60 hour active work weeks and stuff. Or whatever.
That's almost like people talk about agriculture being the first technology, though. I'm thinking like almost paleo, like hunter gatherer stuff.
I think clothing was the first technology, and
Biblical.
yeah. This is a little. I'm sorry if I'm like if I get too caught up in this, like, but
No.
it's
Go ahead.
so the I don't know, man. I could talk forever about this, so I have to be careful. But it's like technology. I think that we forget that like language is technology as well, and I think that like it. Okay, yeah. Please. What are you thinking? I'm so curious. I can't even tell you how curious I am.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when people say language is a technology, they're seeing it as fundamentally emergent, but again, it's the emergence and emanation thing.
Well,
And
some would say
Peter,
that technology was gifted from above.
well, sure.
I think it's the way we are, is
I do too.
to communicate with
Mhm.
each other.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think technology is like inherently bad, though. I think it's kind of ambivalent, and it's like it's just part of who we are. Yeah. It's like, but I also think it's connected to this idea of the garments of skin, like and the garments of clothing and technology and stuff. Where originally, because I always look at this through the lens of like nonverbal language, where it's like at one point we were naked and the garment, the light shined through us, and like we were, we were apprehendable or something like that. That's not. I don't think that's the right word. But and as when the fall happened, we got these garments, and like what that garment is in my mind is the technology of um, like clothing or like body language in a way, and it's like eventually once you remove the garments, then they are gifted back to you in like the pattern of the tabernacle or something, where it's like I think that this is the effective interfacing of we will once again be naked and transparent to each other or something like that.
But I think it's more like where I would go with it is like garments are clothing the no thingness in the same way like the no thingness that is God. Creation is the clothes that you're putting on the form of God in the same way like we do that. But words are also that. That's like the Cormac McCarthy clip that I love about the unconscious when he says like, oh, how to say it. Like we all have the experience of trying to say something that we don't have clothing for. We don't have a name for. But we know what it is.
Clothing is a sign of office. So, and, like that goes all the way through the priest thing. But I even think with Adam and Eve, if you think about it, they're supposed to be in control of the animals. They listen to the snake. Then that's them abdicating their authority. God gives them clothing made out of animal skins as a restoration sign of their office because they're the ones wearing the animal skins, he's reaffirming what they're supposed to be going out and doing, and obviously all the covering the nakedness stuff. But I think that this kind of whole thing about like work and leisure and stuff is really, really apparent in Jordan Peterson's favorite story to botch, which is the story of Cain and Abel, because God curses the ground, so it's going to be difficult for Adam and Eve to work. They have Cain, and they name Cain. The name Cain means increase, and obviously, with the promise about the seed of the woman, their hope is in Cain. And then when Abel comes along, his name means vanity or vapor or nothingness. And they didn't think about him. And then it says once Cain and Abel grow up, Cain starts working in the fields and Abel's taking care of the flocks. The afterthought is taking care of the flocks. But, that's after Cain's grown up. So from Adam's whole life up until that point, how it was difficult for him to bring forth food. That was the thing. He had these sons. He has to feed them. It's difficult. It's hard work. And there's a guy on Twitter who does Hebrew stuff, and he made a really good thread about this, talking about like that the word or whatever that where it talks about like comparing the two sacrifices is saying, like, basically Cain brought a good sacrifice and Abel's sacrifice was in imitation of his brother. But basically Cain did the thing that his father couldn't do. He figured out how to get the land to produce food, to increase. But the weird thing is, okay, why, if that's the case, then why does God prefer Abel over Cain? And ultimately, these sons both do what they were meant to do. Now, and I think this is the interesting thing. Cain's response, when God's preferring Abel, and he says, "Why are you angry? If you just do what just do what you're supposed to do, and things will go well." God's basically like letting Cain off the hook of being the Messiah. He's still Cain. He can still live the rest of his life. He can still grow food. He's great at it, but he's not the one that God picked for whatever the special purpose is. But he spent his whole life with his parents putting all their hope in him, probably being so excited that he seemed to figure out farming better than his father did. And now he has an identity crisis. If I'm not the guy, what am I supposed to do? So he gets jealous of his brother. They fight. He kills him. But the interesting thing is that it says Cain attacked and killed his brother. So it's two actions, which, we could say like manslaughter. He didn't know he was going to kill him. That's the same word. That's the same thing it says with Moses. When Moses, he attacked and killed the Egyptian that was eating the slaves. But I think it also could be, okay, if Cain attacked Abel first as one action, and then he killed him, what did Abel do in between? And I think the answer is what his name means. He did nothing. He didn't resist. He didn't want to fight his brother. And that's why God chose him. That's what he was ultimately chosen to do. So
I like that.
Yeah. So, and that's to say, obviously work and increase and all that stuff is good, but also nothing is good. And doing nothing, if it means not lifting a hand to harm your brother, is usually a very good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty Jesus-y. So this is how I'll lure Chezi and Yosef in. So Abel, Jesus, the blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Hebrews, Jacob's favorite passage, maybe.
Well, this is one other one I came up on that because so it's not Abel's sacrifice is better because of faith, and the thing that it made me think of was when comparing sacrifices, not to look at the material object of the sacrifice, but the faith in which it's given, is the widow's mite. And what it says about the widow's mite is that she gave all her livelihood. It's like
she didn't fear death.
It's not just all her wealth; it's all her livelihood. It was I could buy one meal, or I could give this to the temple. Which that one reminds me of the widow that bakes the cake for Elijah. The same thing. I'm going to make this cake for my son, and then we're going to die. And he gives it to her instead. But that's what Abel gave. He gave his life, That was the sacrifice given in faith. Probably faith of resurrection or, the goodness of God.
Yeah. And I think it's not even, I'm feeling the impulse to say the thing that I always say is that I always encourage people that Christian faith in the resurrection can't be mammon. You can't be like, I do this and then I'm gonna get out of death free card. That's not the kind of hope in resurrection we're talking about. That's not the faith of Abraham. It's not the faith of Abraham. That's not the widow's mite. It's a different thing.
The only way out is through.
And that's, scary. Yeah, Paul, get in here and ad-lib. All the way. Also, Paul, I was watching. I finally got around to. I haven't delved all the riches of the members only of the PBK thing, but I was listening to your talk with Laura, and Laura's flipping great. But there's so many fantastic masculine, feminine anathemas that are said in that conversation, which I can understand why we don't want to make it public. It's like, we're talking about like true egalitarianism and what that implies. Uh-oh. Cover your ears. Paul's hiding. I believe that. This is when Paul's getting ready in the morning. He probably is naked.
We're all naked.
He's got to put on the garments of Costco.
The kingdom is here already. You know,
That's right.
You know, yeah.
All right, I'm probably not going to stay around too long. Does anybody have any? This is.
I just get overwhelmed by like the crazy, like it's so much super salient. It's too
so many
salient.
things. So many things. One of our little.
Yeah.
That's one of those little.
Yeah, there was something
bingo
else.
things of this little corner.
There was something else about the words and stuff, but I seem to have forgotten it. Yes.
To whoever who was asking for a video on the life of Moses, just read it. Like, don't get it through someone else. Just read it. It's not very long. I read it like 10 times in 1 month. So.
Oh, nice. Well, that's Michael. He is the inspiration for Grail Country. He's the one who encouraged Nate to do it. He was actually in here this morning. I don't know if he's still here. I haven't spoken with him forever. It'd be good to see him. Dude, I loved. Anybody have any thoughts as a close? Let someone please wrestle with depends on what you mean. As our TLC lightsaber, I don't know, Chad, what you're talking about with the lightsaber thing. I don't get it. I'm not following you. That's what cuts through bone and marrow.
Is the lightsaber what we defend the blaster bolts of the definitions?
Luke, would you mind? Like, would you? Oh, I feel like you were just about to do it. I was about to ask you to like go back into all that. I think you're about to do it. Like, would you mind
What do you mean
articulating it again? Like
what do you mean by something is essentially what you're doing is you're deconstructing a word, a definitional understanding of a word. Because what do you mean by is a denial of the one-to-one correspondence of words to meaning?
I feel like it's a good faith thing to say because whenever you're saying that, you're probably saying what you said sounds obviously wrong to my brain, but I want to assume that you mean something not stupid. So
yes,
I will ask. It depends on what you mean.
Yes, and that's kind of the agapeing the other person's thing into existence. That's what I have in the description, because no matter how poorly someone is saying something, because of the identity of identity and non-identity, or the Tao, or whatever you want to say, there's truth in whatever anyone's saying, no matter how poorly they're doing it. So how good of a listener are you? How hospitable is your listening? How much can you ask questions and get the truth out of there? Or do you just want to assert something to tear it down? Well, that's like this hyper masculine. No, that's what I used to call. Well, never mind. I won't say it. It's probably not appropriate. Okay. But I used to, in the box, I used to have a saying, which Michael will know. But it's like, it's the foul logocentrism of waving your something in everybody's face all the time.
Yeah, I think the the counterpoint to this is the unspoken, like in the context or something like that, or like perhaps the nonverbal, like, or the how you say it, not just what you say, or something, and like I think it's symbolized by the cup, and you have the logocentrism that you speak of, because the logocentrism is weird, because it's like obviously the logos is central to everything, but in another sense it's like it kind of depends what you mean by logos, and so it's like, in one sense, if we think about logos as like this foul logocentrism type of obsession with being, perhaps left brainism, I don't know.
It's the masculine side of logos.
Yeah, I think it's it's balanced by this. Oh, Sherry, I'm a big fan of Sherry.
Uh-oh, we're having some fanboy action. Meeting your heroes.
Hey, I think it's balanced by the cup, and the cup is what you need to balance the sword.
Well, yeah, the cup, but that's the falling off of your babble.
Mm.
Throw yourself off that babble into the cup.
My
inverted
question-
Yes, so sit in the silence, like encounter the experience, like agape, the other person's perspective, like all that stuff is I think the balancing.
So Paul, the foul logocentrism is central. It's saying it's the hyper masculine side of logos. That's what they're decrying, not logos broadly.
I think it's probably like a misunderstanding, or it's like just a different definition of logos, like, because I would say there's multiple interpretations of what we mean by logos, right?
Here you go. So Paul said, I'm going to go and Sherry's going to take over, but Paul said, I want to leave with this question, ask you guys, and I'll just listen. But so he said that TLC is fundamentally Protestant. He said that earlier. TLC deconstructs because we have a hunger to reconstruct, and we're fundamentally Protestant. Again, this is like, or Paul just say we're fundamentally Calvinist. That's just Christian, isn't it? Prove me wrong. Okay. And so then what are we deconstructing? Or what did he say? What is the TLC protesting against?
I think we're protesting against the death of the spirit of the ecclesia or fellowship or something like that. This might not actually be what I'm thinking, but I'm kind of like just that's what comes to mind. It's like we're like, there is something of value here or something.
So here we go. Wisdom is knowing when to stop. So I'm leaving you with Sherry. Keep it rolling, boys.
Oh, you're
and
leaving?
Sherry.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Oh, I didn't realize he was leaving.
I didn't even
You
brush
said that
my
like
hair yet.
4 times.
I thought I'd keep the thing going because everybody seemed to be just getting into it. So I wanted to hear that quote again, Neil, that you quoted from the Life of Moses, actually.
Okay. The definition of truth is this: not to have a mistaken apprehension of being. Falsehood is a kind of impression which arises in the understanding about non-being, as though what does not exist does in fact exist. But truth is the sure apprehension of real being. True being is what possesses existence in its own nature. Non-being is what is existent only in appearance, with no self-subsisting nature.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't dare to unravel that whole thing, but the first thing that came to my mind when I heard about it was the two natures of Christ, fully God and fully man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about that, and maybe this resonates with you, and if you have any thoughts, I'd like to hear it. I've thought about that in connection with the idea of the gods and animism, and there's the idea that, okay, I have to backpedal a little bit in my thoughts, because Martin Shaw said something one time in a conversation with somebody else that he didn't like the word archetypes because archetypes denatures the thing, right? So for the ancient person, Thor was thunder. So thunder was fully thunder and fully God. You get what my drift?
Yeah.
This is the two natures of Christ. Fully God and fully human. Okay. So it goes from a natural element or a natural occurrence within nature, which is what animism does, right? To the human being. But I think that, and I mentioned in the comments that this is the panentheistic principle, right? Of God in the world and the world in God. And so when you start to make distinctions that denature things, and this is why Martin Shaw doesn't like the word archetype, then you take away that actual panentheistic principle out of the world. You strip it bare, and it becomes immediately materialistic, right? And then you can't reconcile fully God and fully human. You have no way of reasoning or rationalizing that concept because you've denatured all of creation. And this is why animism, in my opinion, is important. Because I made that comment also. So anyway, those are my thoughts when I heard that. Because when St. Gregory's talking about existence, he's talking about the nature of creation, which is fully God and fully whatever else, right? So this is where the primitive, or I don't even like that word, the ancient mind would have had it absolutely right that Thor was fully God, fully thunder. They weren't separable to the ancient person. They were the same thing because they perceived God in his creation, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So those are my thoughts. If anybody has more to add, I'd like to hear it.
I mean, I always like the way, like Francis Schaeffer always talked about God, God is of the Bible as being an infinite personal God, because, and saying like we can't comprehend him on the level of the infinite, but we can understand him on the level of the personal. And I was kind of going back and forth with Jacob the other day about why Jesus isn't so great or whatever. And he was saying like Jesus didn't even get married or father children or whatever, like as to say his life wasn't archetypal enough to have had the significant representation. And I was thinking about that, but then I think if it was just mythology, it would make sense for that or whatever, just like manufactured mythology or legend that really just arose out of something. But Jesus had one particular life, and he couldn't do everything possible that a person could do in one particular life. But that aspect of having one particular life in which you cannot do every single possible thing is a universal that is true of every single person that's ever lived. And so in a sense, what he didn't accomplish is one of the things that makes him knowable and understandable to us. Because we all have things that we didn't, why didn't my parents do this? Why wasn't I born in that place? Why didn't I, whatever the things are, like he had just as much, he had a normal life that was just as particularly unique as every other life. And that is, the uniqueness is a universal aspect of all human lives.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of defending Christ's divinity.
That's
like that's not
right.
That's not where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So like St. Gregory says in there that I can't remember the last part of it, Neil, but something about to see the very existence of something, right? The very And for me, when he's talking about existence, he's also talking about essence. He's talking about potential. He's talking about seeing something for what it actually is, not how it presents to you. And how it actually is what it contains. So it's the metaphor of the acorn becoming the oak tree, which the fathers use all the time. Right? They're all over that metaphor. Or I like the caterpillar and the butterfly, right? Because the caterpillar looks nothing like the butterfly, and but becomes the butterfly, and in the butterfly, the caterpillar is made whole, complete. He's not lost. He's not destroyed. So the essence of who the caterpillar is fulfilled in the butterfly. Right? And everything is contained within the acorn and the caterpillar. And this is what St. Gregory's talking about when he talks about the truth of the existence. And that's why I'm talking about the two natures of Christ, because that is exactly what Christ is. He's fully God and fully human, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it to defend his divinity. I'm talking about the essence of something that, that we need to be able to see. That we've lost, let me say it this way, that we've lost the ability to see.
Yes, 100%. So losing the ability to see is something I've been thinking about a lot in relation to this psalm. The idols of man are silver and gold, works of the hands of men. Eyes have they and shall not see, ears have they and shall not hear. They lips have they, but they cannot breathe or speak. Let those that make them
Talking
become
about
like
the psalm that talks about
yeah. So I'm seeing in that like how we in the building of the Tower of Babel, where our idols are becoming dumber. Because we're progressively losing more and more of our nature as we create gods that are less and less God.
Well, see, here's the thing about that psalm. The closing line in the description of the idol, and the idol is described as something that has all the abilities to sense the world around it, but is unable to, right?
Yeah.
And so, but what it says at the end of that description is that, and those who worship them become like them. Okay.
Exactly.
So it's actually what it is that it's describing. This is why you're saying the idols are dumber. Actually, we are.
We are. Yes, exactly. That's exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
We lose all our senses.
Yeah. And this
which
is the
I
whole
find really
disenchantment, 100%.
right. So we don't experience the world around us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we use the imagination as the organ of perception is. Luke says that a lot. I know that at least some church fathers have said this, but so our imagination is bound at the edges by the gods that we worship, like like if your ultimate is sub-ultimate, then
So
you cannot perceive beyond it.
right, like George MacDonald uses in his imagination essay, he uses this example. The essay is the cultivation and culture of the imagination, and so when he talks about cultivating it, he says that if if the imagination is not cultivated, then she stays home to be sensual instead of going out to worship. Okay.
I love it. That's beautiful.
So you and Tomberg talks about this in terms of the closed world of the serpent, the Ouroboros, right? So you're eating your own tail. You live on a horizontal plane with no transcendence, right? No transcendence, just horizontal, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's what happens, and this is why idolatry turns you into a person who cannot experience creation. And then, going back to George MacDonald, he says that creation is the divine imagination of God. Okay, because that's where it came from, and everything in it is imbued with meaning that God gave it. And our job is to use our imagination to light the lamp within it. So every form within nature is imbued with a meaning from God, and it has a lamp in it that we have to light and understand in order to understand the story that we're in. Because we're in a story. And everything around us is telling us the story. That's why we use metaphors like acorns and caterpillars, because the story is told to us over and over and over in creation. And so we live within the divine imagination of God. That's where we live. And if we don't live on a vertical axis, then we live on a horizontal one, and we stay home to be sensual instead of going out to worship. And then we lose our senses.
Yeah.
Which is what? Insanity. Right?
Yeah.
I was that was a similar conversation I was having about that the other day. But I was thinking, I was kind of talking about, like, because I make stuff all the time, but I can't make anything without imagining it first. Like,
No.
So first it comes, but kind of, I mean, this is, I guess this is the thing to say. I don't know. Obviously, we can't comprehend God's experience of it, but the wonder of it is that I can just imagine things, and it's awesome in my imagination. Like if I imagine a story, or if I imagine like something I could build, if I had all the resources that I could imagine or whatever. Right. But instead, but what I do is I look around my garage and I look at the stuff that I have, and I imagine what I can do with what I have. But then the kind of cool thing is that once it's done, it's never exactly how I imagined it. It's always surprising in some way. And so, and some of that's because of mistakes, and some of that's because of things, whatever, good stuff, bad stuff, whatever. But then that realization, like that it makes my imagination stronger. So then I have to imagine more things and make more things, and like it keeps going.
Well, I had this little epiphany one time talking with Jess about the imagination, because I imagined that the imagination, like if you could draw a picture of someone with an imagination bubble over their head, it would just be an infinite bubble, right? It would work like a funnel. It would just kind of expand out into the four corners of your comic strip and never end, because your imagination has the ability to imagine anything, right? In your imagination, pigs can fly, right? So what you're talking about is infinite. When you're talking about the imagination, right? You're talking about the infinite. And when you choose something out of that and you take it into your body, you incarnate it and you create it, you have made it finite. You have made the infinite finite.
Yeah, that's the other aspect too. Is then the thing of like my imagination I can enjoy, and I can like if I think about like a story or something, like I can enjoy a story in my mind, and I could enjoy it whatever for a long time. I could keep adding things to it, but like there's a different quality when you write it down or you make the thing, the object, the piece of art, or whatever, because then you can share it with somebody else. And not only do you have the experience of you seeing it with your own eyes and being surprised by the difference between what you made and what you imagined, but then you get to see it through other people's eyes too. And but it does. But I guess this is my because this was kind of arguing with Jacob or whatever. Ultimately said is like, if I was wrong about Jesus, if I was wrong about like worshiping Jesus, you still need something. Like you can't like if the only characteristic that the real that you can accurately define God by is his unknowableness, then that's kind of a problem for us. Like, how will we ever know? So we have to know something, and our understanding is always going to be wrong, obviously, but he, if he's good and loving and compassionate, then he forgives us for our misunderstanding of his incarnation and all his kinds of
Michael,
incarnation.
I think even though you have an image, right, which is what Christ calls himself, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father, right? He's the image of God, which is what we all are, okay? He's still unknowable. He is still, Christ is unknowable. I am unknowable. You are unknowable. If we were knowable, we would be bored of each other within a millisecond.
Like ultimately speaking, like if you could know something fully,
well, to
like
see something is not to know it.
Yeah,
that's my whole point.
Right.
From the beginning of this conversation. That's why we have to understand the two natures of Christ, because we've lost the ability to see the essence of what the story we are in. I feel like I'm preaching now, sorry. It's just really passionate for me. Right?
Yeah.
I think it's good stuff,
yeah. And so it's like, Jacob can't say that the God you have is knowable, and you can't either. He isn't knowable because you see him.
No,
you can know him to some extent, though, right? Like you can.
I'm not saying you can't know him.
Depends on what you mean by know.
I'm married. Paul Vanderklay uses this example all the time, and my husband still surprises me. I've been married for 37 years. Okay, so is he knowable? Yeah. Is he knowable? No, not fully. He's not. Mm-hmm. So what does that make him? If he's not knowable and he is knowable, that makes him fully human and fully God. Because that's what God is. Not knowable.
I think perhaps what you were saying about like the imagination going out to worship might be maybe what was on your mind, or what Sherry was saying about that might perhaps be what connected to what you were saying about like you can spend all this time and we can infinitely imagine, because like it's not until you actually apply the imagination for the good or something that it like that it actually I don't know exactly, but there's something, I feel like there was a connection there. I really loved that quote when you read that initially, Sherry. I thought that was super, like it really resonated with me because I feel like I've been pulled in those ways, where it's like go, and it's like when you when you use the imagination in worship, it's like that is how the circle is opened in a way. It's like that's when things happen,
Exactly.
and
That's when the muse arrives.
yeah, and yeah, and but I've also had times where it's like just or when you do that, yeah, I don't know. I think you got the gist of what I was saying there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, like to make it a really concrete example, during all the COVID lockdowns, right? Was there any imagination available to anyone at that point in time? I don't think so. Nobody could imagine anything except what they were, they were locked into this world of facts and figures, right? And so they literally stayed home to be sensual. like it was like the perfect example, right, of people, just, I don't know. I can't,
Because if people imagine, we don't want the powers that be don't want people imagining. That's what I have to say. It's like maybe that's not the best way. It's like if people are imaginative and they fill the world with light or something, by encountering it, and I don't know, like I think that I think that's a great example, and I think that we've not, I think it's noteworthy to see that that's how it went during COVID, because it reveals the larger pattern that's going on in terms of this quenching of the imagination. This no, that's not the right word. This attack on the imagination. It's
the imagination is wild and unpredictable, which, in my opinion, is what God is. And in my conversation with Martin Shaw, I said at one point, the problem is that we like to domesticate things, right? Because, which is not a bad thing. Like, we want to be able to use them for we need to live, right? So we want to be able to go out in the field and catch our cow and milk it. And we don't want to deal with a wild one. So we domesticate things. But the problem is that when we learn the convenience, and that's capitalize that, just capitalize that word, because we love convenience, right? And that's why we do domestication. Then we start domesticating everything because we don't like wild and unpredictable in our lives.
I think that's connected to this the civilizational thing and what you were talking about, the tower. Where it's the building, and because civilization is kind of like domestication, right? It's like
it is. That's
yeah,
what it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of like it's a balance, right? It's like you have to have both sides.
Well, that's why we have the vertical and the horizontal, right? And so when, like you were saying, opening up to the imagination, that's climbing the ladder of rationality to open the door of irrationality, right? To
I think I see what you're saying,
understand
yeah.
that it is only through rationality that we encounter irrationality, and that the cosmos or existence, as Gregory Nyssa says, is irrational, essentially, right? And
It's almost like a
you know,
redeemed irrationality, though. It's like you have to kind of go through rationality and
you
reason.
come to
And
the end of your rationality, right?
yeah, yeah.
The end
Well,
of your ladder.
yeah, it's like a prodigal journey in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you know, like obviously, like a complete lack of any boundaries or borders or anything.
Yeah.
It like, you know, I guess it's kind of like that thing where Jordan Peterson talks about, like, let's play a game, and he says you go first. It's like that's too
Too
much for
open-ended.
us to,
Yeah.
like, you could say, like, you have unlimited room to imagine anything you want, but you don't have any kind of starting place. You don't have any constraints. And
Right.
and I think that the opposite is kind of like what happened with the COVID times, that everybody was, the freedom to imagine was so limited by all these, you know, doom, these sayings of doom, and about if you leave your door open, or if you contact other people,
Or if you
and all these
question the
things.
narrative, you know.
Yeah,
I think our metaphysical constraints
you
are.
need both.
I think that our like we do need constraint, right, in order to create.
Mm.
Actually, constraint is one of the greatest
It's like
purveyors
restriction and limitation,
of
right? It's
constraint.
like Saturn and Jupiter, restriction, limitation, and
Yeah, the more constraint you have, the more creative you become, right? So it's like,
I don't know.
and I think that our constraints are, you know, our God-given constraints are time and our bodies.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, you'll never, you won't be able to fill your own self. Like, there's plenty of, you are a constraint.
Yeah.
On yourself.
Right, and this
Like,
goes to the garments of skin comment, right?
Yeah.
Because they're, you know, a lot of people like to think that it's correct. Jesus or God killed some animals and clothed them with skins, hides from animals. But there's also the idea that they were beforehand, they were light. They were just pure light. And God gave them skin, actual skin. And so,
as in like the skin was better.
Yeah, like they had no skin. They were just garments.
Or
We were the garments, their skin, their own skin, which is also their limitation, right? And that's after that, that's where the limitations come in. Now you know you'll experience pain in childbearing, and you know you will toil and labor, and they're cast out into the thorns, right?
But eventually the garments
enter the skin.
But eventually the garments are like, I'm thinking about the transfiguration, right? And I'm thinking about how like our, like the garments of skin become transfigured eventually, right? Like this whole this fall into I don't know if I would think about the fall as like precise limitation or something, because I also think it's like there's a certain I don't know, like this is too big for me to speak about, but
just say whatever you're thinking.
Like I'm not thinking. I think limitation and imagination, all these terms. Like I feel like the terminology is hard for me to comprehend, because in some sense I think about imagination as like this, like the artist's spirit, like the non-limitation, right? Like Jupiter, abundance. I don't know, like expansiveness and the quickly moving spirit or something like that. But I don't know. What honestly, what honestly is in my mind right now is Galahad Adonis's Cosmogram. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that, but it's this.
Did you freeze, Jonathan?
May have frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Staying remarkably still.
Yeah.
Right after
Well,
he went
yeah.
somewhere we could not follow because we don't know
What did he
he's talking
mention
about.
beforehand? I missed. Was it a movie or a book?
I'm not sure. I literally have no frame of reference.
Yeah, me either. Me either. Well, maybe he can tell us if he gets back on.
Well, I was thinking about like the negative, or I don't know. I guess like the negative side of imagination, or whatever too. Like, because if I think like I want to make something or I want to do something, something could go wrong. Like, and
Or you could imagine something evil.
yeah,
Really easily.
and I think and the one impulse is to say don't do it because something could go wrong, but the better and I think this is the pattern you see God doing all throughout the Bible is that he's saying, you know what, something might go wrong if I let these people do what they want, but I can fix it, and not even just fix it, but and I think this was kind of the thing about that if you can accept the trauma or whatever that comes to you with the right attitude and the perfect attitude, which is what Jesus does, then it doesn't cause the damage psychologically or whatever. That was from the conversation in Paul's video. That basically saying like one person can think about their life and be like, I was so traumatized, and it was just like their parents yelled at them sometimes, and somebody else can be actually suffer all sorts of horrible things, but if their attitude is like this is just part of how the world works, and it's something to overcome, then like there's so much healthier how you go into it. And so I think that like our fear causes us to not do a lot of things because of that fear of what will go wrong, what will be the trauma, and the kind of and I mean that's what I say, like, why is there all this pain and suffering in the world and stuff like that? And God says that's what you need to have a world, but that's okay. I can take that pain and suffering and I can turn that into something good, like, in not to make light of any of that pain and suffering and stuff, but I think that is kind of the most amazing thing. And I guess that's even like what Luke is talking about, trampling down death by death. Like take death and use death as the thing that you use to destroy death.
Yes. Yeah. And I think touching on the dangers of imagination, I think the mode of imagination should be dialogical, not neither receptive nor penetrating, but both. Like if you go into imagination as like with a clear endpoint in mind, and you say, this is what I will create in my mind, odds are good that it's not good. And if you go in and say, I will bring nothing, I will just receive and get out of it the good that I want,
Well, that's what we do.
either. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do with everything.
Yeah.
We swing from one extreme to the other, and the idea is to, like, we did a book early on the channel called The Apocalypse of St. John, and it's
Mhm.
It's an interpretation of Revelation by an anthroposophic writer named Emil Bock.
Mhm.
And in there, he talked about the Aramonic, which
Mhm.
is the small beast in Revelation that looks harmless,
Mhm.
which could be now labeled the machine,
Mhm.
okay? Because it's on the dry land, and it's cold to the touch. It's steely. So it represents this idea of the machine, right? And the luciferic, which is in the water, right?
Mhm.
And is warm, and right. These are the passions.
Mhm.
And he describes how the passions lead you up to the Aramonic,
Mhm.
which is this movement from the water to the dry land,
Mhm.
which we know from the theory of evolution,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's also an evolution of consciousness.
Mhm.
So Revelation talks about it uses terms like destruction and annihilation and fiery pits and all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Those in my opinion those go back to all that cannot be shaken will remain.
Mhm.
Right? But Bach says that the idea is not to eliminate the passions or
Mhm.
the machine,
Cons-
but to bring them to domesticate them, to bridle them, right? Which is this role of mediation that we have in the world as human beings, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Between heaven and earth. Heaven
Mhm.
being this unknowable, wild, unpredictableness
Mhm.
of the world, and the earth being the grounded, thing that I use and toil upon to survive, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yes.
so, and so we have to stop swinging from these extremes of just, letting everything, follow its passion,
Mhm.
right? Or tying everything down and ordering it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to put those things into, like you said, a conversation with one another, right?
Yeah. So when I'm hearing in that pray without ceasing,
Yeah.
like a prayer is this.
Yeah, and it's also the
Like
sacrament.
that's what it is. It's bringing these things together, offering it up, and receiving. It's
Right.
all. It is the sign of the cross.
It's so gratitude.
Yes.
It is gratitude, and I
Yes.
think that's where that's at the heart of all of
Mhm.
this. And I don't want to
Yes.
overstate it because I talk about it all the time. But
Mhm.
it's like, because when you put yourself into the pose
Mhm.
or the mentality or the mindset of gratitude, then
Mhm.
suddenly you are at the mercy of God.
Yes.
Okay?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you perceive
Mhm.
also the mercy of God. And then you start to see the world not as denatured but as enchanted, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
As panentheistic, where
Yeah.
God is in the world and the world is in God.
Yes.
And then you're back to a garden of sorts, but a
Mhm.
more mature
Mhm.
garden,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is what we needed to be. We need
Yeah.
to be in a more mature garden, right? We
Mhm.
can't, because, well, this is just off the top of my head, but Adam and Eve in the garden were deceived because they weren't mature,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So
And like the metaphor of the milk greens meat in St. If where like as an infant you're given milk and then like you gradually get the meat. If we return to the garden as it was, it would be like us drinking only milk.
Right.
Because we've been outside of the garden, and now the garden is bigger.
Yeah, and Owen Barfield talks about this in terms of original participation,
Mhm.
which would be the garden, withdrawal,
Mhm.
and final participation,
Mhm.
right? So you have you could talk about those from our perspective, like we originally participate with God, we withdraw from God, we finally participate with God.
Mhm.
But you can also say God originally participates with us, God withdraws from us, God finally participates with us. Both of those things are true, right? And in Judaism, there's a thing called tzimtzum, which is the withdrawal of God. When God withdraws, because he's so big, like in very simple terms, that if there would be no room for anything else to grow. So he withdraws so that we can grow. And we sense this, right? Because he's hidden from us. And that's why I'm going to go right back to the divine imagination and George MacDonald's conception of it, because that's where we find him again. We find him in creation, and we find out what the story is that we're in.
Mhm.
And as for the imagination going bad, nope, goes bad. Everything goes bad. You don't look after it.
As I said, bad is not bad if you deal with what you consider bad. It's only bad if it keeps you from ever creating and just leaving it in the imagination. If the mistakes that you could make keep you from trying to do anything, that's the biggest tragedy.
Right. And that is what, like Neil pointed out, that's idolatry.
Mhm.
Because you lack all your senses. You're insane and you can't experience the world around you. And that's really where we are today. Like it's terrifying. Like, in my opinion anyway, we're insane. We've lost our senses.
Yeah.
Isn't that another term for insanity?
Yeah.
It is for me anyway.
Yeah. Imagine a world with only 5 senses. Gosh. And then we did, and now we live there.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah. Well, my family's bumping around upstairs, so I should sign off now. But
All right.
it was a really great pleasure to talk to you guys.
Indeed.
And Neil, I just wanted to say I super enjoyed your conversation with Chad.
Thank you so
I
much.
bawled my eyes out.
Me too.
I bawled my eyes out when you described your first experience in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah. I listened back to it, and I was like, man, this guy really gets me.
I haven't listened yet, so I'll have to check it out this afternoon. But
Good.
Something to look forward to.
Now I have to figure out how to end this stream, because I don't even know if I leave. Do I end it?
I think
There should be one that says end stream up in the corner, not just leave, but it should say end stream.
It doesn't on my iPad. I'm on my
on the iPad. Then it may just be because I don't know, I can't do anything. So,
I'm gonna head out.
Yeah,
So it was a fun time. I'm
Yeah,
sure
it was
I'll
good.
get on again.
All right,
Yeah.
so everybody just leaves and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just leave.
Okay, bye bye.